Hello and welcome. So in today's show, we've got Exitus as always and Jake Yocom-Piatt. So good to see you guys. How are we?
Doing well yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm loving this Decred stuff and loving Decred 2 or 2.0, 2.3 now. What you guys have been up to is absolutely amazing. So it's great to have you on the show, just kind of hopefully go into some of the background, this stuff, and really what we're all looking for is where do we go from here now that we've got this what I class as a feature rich and a feature complete platform is what are the next step for us? What can we address with that? Now, hopefully, everyone in the audience can hear us. If you do have questions, post away. I'll try and follow the comments, and I'll get Exus to chuck some up there as we need to. But we're going to have a fairly open discussion. I've written some notes down of things that I'd like to discuss, but moreover, it's just about kind of just having a chat and seeing how we all are in the direction of Decred. So before the show, both myself and Jake, we were talking about price action, which happens to be one of Air Sand Fire's one of his first questions. So let's start with that. Why not? It's always a bit exciting to talk about price. What are you making of the last week where we've had a bit of a plummet? Well, maybe over 2 weeks now, and it just looks like we might be on the fringe of something a bit different.
I don't know. I'm kind of a disillusioned element when it comes to price action. It's as best I can tell, most of the price action on Decred is driven by a monolithic bot on Binance. So if that bot decides to walk the price up, the price goes up. If they decide to paint the chart gets painted. If they decide to walk the price down, the price goes down. Whoever's running that bot, it's not me. And that's sort of my sense of price action, which is that as based on our fundamentals, I feel like it's never made any sense. Basically, ever since roughly 2018, our chart really hasn't made any sense. At least prior to then, it was kind of like, hey, people are excited about what we're doing. And it's like, then people continue being excited about what we're doing. And it's like, well, Binance doesn't agree. And so it's whoever that is or whatever that is on Binance, that's the driver of most of this, unfortunately.
We were saying before the show, whereas in terms of the pound, it certainly looks like we're kind of finding a nice stable level, and probably the dollar as well. But in terms of the Bitcoin, we're super low, which if you're holding Bitcoin, I mean, I don't think since the beginning of Decred there's been a better time to get in. So I mean, it's all interesting, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of happens as we go forward, whether we see these radical moves or if we just see gradual steps. And Jake was talking about Monero before we got onto this, about the way that they've found kind of almost genuine price action now, and it'd be nice to get to that point as well. What about your thoughts, Exus? Have you been following the shenanigans?
I mean, yeah, I think everyone checks the charts. I mean, it's an important part of cryptocurrency, and in Decred's case, the exchange rate affects the treasury, so it's all in tandem. Obviously, none of us can control it, and it sucks to see it go down. But it's kind of like a casino where at some point your chip gets chosen. Like Zcash this week went up a bunch, and it's like, why? What did they do? No one knows. It's just it's something we can't control. But as long as we're above, I don't know, $10, $11, the treasury's safe. And we have a huge release with Bison Wallet coming, maybe within the next few weeks. And I think that's going to change a lot of things. And that's a super interesting product. I mean, you can atomic swap with stable coins. Who else can do that?
Yeah, I mean, we were also talking about the Zcash action as well. I mean, they've basically done, close to 75% this week, as has Dash as well. And we were just kind of referring back to, if this is all market maker where they push the bot right up, and who's going to buy into that is basically going to create the next set of sell, or the next kind of bot sell-offs, if you like. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there, whether it goes all the way back down to that £15 point. I don't know what that is in dollars, but we'll see. Or if this is the start of the alt market.
Another big thing
Jake.
is in sorry, one more thing. In 10 days, I think Trump is speaking at a Bitcoin conference in Nashville. So that should be really interesting to see kind of what he has to say, or what his team tells him to say. I'm sure he's going to say a lot of the right things that will maybe help the market a bit.
I could definitely see that. I mean, I hope we can turn a corner from this, sort of like Biden fiat financial institution, anti-cryptocurrency sentiment that seems to pervade the SEC, and then also just all the positive attention, heaped on Bitcoin lately, I think is, it's a mixed bag, right? It's like, okay, there's been some positive price action, but does that really match the institutional inflow amounts? And that doesn't quite add up to me. And then it's like, to me, as soon as the big institutions show up and you're in a major ETF on a major exchange, that to me signals they are trying to rig the price. The big boys have been called into play, where it's like, the market makers and the usual sort of price rigging games that they do with precious metals aren't working. So they need to get somebody in there to command that institutional money to sort of affect that same thing. So it's definitely been an interesting past several months since the ETFs went green.
What do you guys make of this? I mean, we wrote an article. I didn't write it, but there was something saying that Trump was positive crypto. Do you kind of concur with that, or do you think he's just saying whatever the masses want to hear at this point?
Well, something like 1 in 4 Americans holds crypto, so it makes sense politicians would want to be pro crypto to get votes. I mean, it just makes sense. But like I said, I don't think Trump understands Bitcoin at all, but his team knows what to say to get people excited. So they might say things. It's a, I don't know if they're actually going to act on anything, but I think it's overall a good development, especially now that it looks like Trump's going to win because Biden basically has dementia. So
yeah. I mean, the whole where the rubber meets the road with politicians. I like to hear, hey, somebody who isn't anti-crypto, that's good. But then, just like you're saying, I mean, what it really comes down to is rubber meets the road. It's like, unfortunately, we don't have a proof of stake governance model for meat space and our governments. So there's a big disconnect between the incentives to say that you're going to support crypto versus actually doing it, right? You're going to say it to get the votes, and then you get in and you're like, I don't know, maybe I'll do that. So, I mean, hey, I hope it happens. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I think so. It would be nice to see some positivity around it, but it would also nice. I mean, maybe I'm a bit controversial here, but it would also be nice to see some of these scam projects actually being clamped down on. I mean, over the last year, we've seen just umpteen amounts of these things pump and dump on consumers that are none the wiser, and that kind of frustrates the hell out of me, actually, because people, projects like Decred, we can't get any scope at all. I mean, you've only got to look at our latest release, and from my knowledge, none of the big publications have picked up on it, but they'll quite happily pick up on some meme project being tokenized on Solana and pump it like it's the next greatest thing. And you think, well, in actual fact, yes, it's all very nice, but real money's involved in these things, and it does get quite frustrating. So maybe I'm on the flip side of the regulation talk there.
Yeah, I think something that's an unfortunate reality, and has become very clear to me over the 10 years I've been doing the Decred thing, is that, and most of this crypto work, is that basically the major publications are owned by people who have conflicts of interest, rather than be nominally fair and declare those conflicts of interest. Basically, most of them are held back. At best, you'll get like hey, I'm the author of this article and I own a little bit of whatever, right? And then it's like, well, who owns the publication, and who do they answer to? And so it's like, you get these publications, and then they're like, oh, I'm a neutral arbiter of of information, and you should believe me. And it's like, no, well, who owns CoinDesk? It's like, well, it's changed. It changed hands recently, didn't it? So it's like, and then my understanding, it's like, who owned it before? And so it's like, these questions of getting a fair shake in the media. It's like, man, I thought it was rough in the mainstream media. It's even rougher in the cryptocurrency media, because there's only a few major outlets and they're very much under control. It's one thing that I find so ironic about the space is that, right, the space is about unrigging games to some extent, right? We're making sovereign currency, we're making proof of stake, but everything is so rigged apart from the actual technology. You zoom into the technology and it's like, oh, this is great, this is sortition, it's fair. And then you zoom out and it's like, oh, somebody runs a mining farm and they own all the coin. And then it's like, guess what? The publication is owned by the same person who owns the mining farm. It's like, oh my God, like what a mess.
Yeah, I mean, it does certainly seem that way. And I presume you meant it's about unrigging rather than rigging the game.
Oh yeah,
But,
yeah.
yeah.
The goal in theory is to unrig the game, but then like there's a lot of people who are like the decoy unriggers, like I'm shit token on Solana and I'm here to unrig the game, and that's why we only issued 1% of our of our pre-mined token, and then drove the price up and manipulated that so that you think it's worth $1 billion and it's really worth basically zero.
I mean, what do you make of the fact that I mean, this back on a slight topic with the privacy release of Decred, but what do you make of the fact that Decred, in my knowledge, and maybe you guys know better projects or different projects that are doing it slightly different, but to my knowledge, is the first privacy service that is completely peer-to-peer, and nothing's been made of that. No one has kind of gone, hey, we need to look at this. This is amazing, and gone into a deep dive. And for me, like you said about unrigging the games, this is exactly where it is. We've seen several of these mixers get banned and people go to jail because they were running these centralized fee-seeking mixing services. And there was a big uprising, especially from people in the Monero space. Seth for privacy comes to my mind. But you release this wonderful tool, and they were literally going mad about these people going to prison, and our privacy is the biggest thing since sliced bread. And you release this peer-to-peer thing, and not a word. And when it got released, I was talking to Seth, and boom, nothing. And it's like, what do you make of that?
I think again, it's if we look at how things have proceeded in the privacy space, there's really been two major approaches. One is multi-party computation, and the other one is single-party computation. I'll just call it single-party computation, where, say, Zcash and Monero and other ones that are similar. I think is it Firo, like the other one that does ZKPs? I forget if that was the rebrand, if that's the post rebrand, or I think that's the current name of the project, but. They approach things from a single party computation perspective. The idea being you do the computations locally and then you publish like basically a large, typically pretty bloated in size transaction. And then that transaction is private, right? And the good part about, single party computation is that it's hard to denial of service. If there's only one party doing the computation, you can't like really get in there and like screw up the computation, right? Unless you're on that computer, mucking about with that computer in particular. But then you look at our approach, and I think, there's other projects that have taken similar approaches, like Dash has their mixing, but they sort of, made their mixing technology, called it good enough. And I don't think it's changed very much since 2014. So it's basically, they came out with it. It was kind of decentralized coin join. And, and then boom, it's, that's it, that's done. And so it's like, in terms of where we've gone with it, we went multi-party computation. And then we actually went through the phases that you would normally expect, a real peer-to-peer protocol to go through. You start with it centralized with a coordinator. You make it work. You make it so the coordinator doesn't take custody over any of the important data. Then you sort of promote it up, and then you go, okay, how do we make this functioning thing with a coordinator peer-to-peer? Then you do that, and then you you focus on basically stabilizing that for a while. And so, my impression is that this is presumably how Bitcoin was created, and probably it did not occur over a year or two or three.
Yeah, definitely. We had Dave on obviously last time, and just to see the amount of effort that's gone into kind of making this stuff work, and you just think, geez, if some of these publications and some of these what they call themselves, influencers, really cared about this stuff, you'd expect to see more done on kind of delving into how it all works. And just hearing from you there, the way that we did start with this communicating server, and then we've kind of bumped it up, and now it's running directly in the full node DCRD, which just blows my mind actually. And Dave, if anyone in the audience wants to know more about that, Dave went into massive amount of depth on the last state of the market, and it was absolutely amazing actually. Most of it went completely over my head, but it was just great to see people working on this stuff and people still caring about the fact that this stuff should be peer-to-peer.
I feel like the other issue, I guess I didn't fully answer your question before, but the part of the issue is that like everybody wants to sell their bag. And I feel like, I saw this before I even got involved in the cryptocurrency space, which is you can come up with the greatest idea And there's basically there's sort of like 2 or 3 major ways to break it down. There's first, you have an idea and you think it's great, and everybody else is like, that's stupid. Okay, it's not significant, right? It's like a nonsense. It's like a nonsense idea. It's nonsense technology. Nobody cares. Then there's like a sort of like the next bracket is it's a good idea, and it's not so far ahead that other people can recognize it as a good idea, right? Where it's like, oh, it's like a shoe, but it's like it's a better shoe. Oh, I get it. I wear shoes. I could use a better shoe. And I feel like there's a lot of hyped garbage in the space that falls into that second category. That is the stuff that lands in the first category kind of goes nowhere, like say dental coin. Maybe it's pump and dumped once, and then it's like, okay, dental coin is done. Or Denta coin. I forget if it has an L or not. But the point is that there's these dumb ideas. They pop up, they disappear. Then there's ideas that are slightly better and they're tangible to the average person. The average person, like, whoa, programmable money. What if I could create a distributed computer? And I would actually file, say, Ethereum under that bucket. But what anyone who's really familiar with, say, Bitcoin recognized when Ethereum showed up was you can do most of this stuff with Bitcoin is highly programmable, despite the fact that almost nobody programs with it, right? And then you get into you move past that and you get to ideas where, oh, it's a brilliant idea, but people are either highly incentivized not to see it as a good idea and to sort of talk you down, or they're too dumb to see that that something is a good idea. And I feel like, say, peer-to-peer mixing we're getting towards the edge of what people understand as why should you be doing this. Now, despite the fact that, just like you pointed out, there are these people, in the Bitcoin space and the Monero space who are like, oh, privacy this, oh, privacy that. Well, in the case of Monero doesn't want to celebrate or lift up any competitors very much. I mean, as evidenced by their behavior towards Zcash. I mean, it's like, I would say that borders on toxic, right? Where it's like, I get it, you guys are in competition with Zcash, but like shit talking Zcash to the point of like, oh my God, like what is wrong with you guys, is that's not constructive either. And so I feel like to some extent, it's unlikely that we'll get a lot of props from Monero people from this because of the same effect, which is that really what Monero has going for it is the privacy and the ASIC resistance. And they're highly incentivized to make it seem like everybody else's privacy tech is junk, so that funnels more people into Monero. So, I understand that. And so I think that that's actually going to drive a lot, which is there's a lot of people who are already sort of on the Monero train. And then it's like, oh, well, there's other tech out there that can, give people powerful privacy. Maybe it's not quite the same. Maybe it's not quite as easy as using Monero, but there's trade-offs, and people don't want to hear that. Like basically people who are big Monero fans are like Monero maxis. And I feel like it's a problem in the space. And I think Kramer in one of our chats said that, cryptocurrency is disappointing in the sense that it's become like NGU clubs, right? It's like not even really what are we here for the tech? What are we here for? It's not just an NGU club. It's like, I don't know, I'm here to build something and, and to make money better. And that, that's how I roll.
I showed a Monero guy, Bison Wallet, and I did a podcast with him. He didn't release it yet, but he was really impressed. He was like, this is the best decentralized DEX I've seen. This is the best atomic swap DEX I've seen, because it's so professional looking, and you have the stable coins, and it's easy to set up. It's an executable file. You just launch it. So he was super impressed, and I told him, Monero is going to come to it eventually. So I a lot of the Monero people are maximalists, but I think there is room for them to appreciate other things, especially like Decred, which, let's be honest, Decred's main feature isn't privacy. It's kind of like a side feature.
It's
the
secondary.
Main features, main features, governance, DAO voting, etc. And a lot of these Monero people, they don't like Decred's privacy because it's opt-in. It's not by default. And to them, if it's not default, it's not really worth it. So it makes sense that they would kind of ignore Decred's privacy release, at least from what I've seen on reading on Twitter and whatnot. And that's another reason why they don't like Zcash. It's not private by default. Now, of course, in Decred's case, the privacy, we have a huge participation. We have something like 62% of the supply mix. So it's a little bit different than Zcash's case or, Bitcoin's mixing.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that is one of the major issues with Zcash, which is that despite the fact that the ZKPs are, it's pretty novel, it's complex enough that I question it. That's that's always been a trouble for me, is like, at least with Monero and Ring CT, it's like I understand what each of the components do. I understand how each of them work. I understand that like that it scales logarithmically, and if anybody breaks like whatever it is, non post quantum crypto, they're going to have very serious problems, because that same technology is not available post quantum, at least as far as I'm aware, and it might actually be a fundamental mathematical. My understanding of it is that post quantum PKI cannot accommodate the various like the range proofs and all this other stuff that that Monero does in a space efficient way. So it's like there's a whole bunch of stuff that would break if you go post quantum, and I feel like the focus on on Zcash it's warranted, because so few people actually use opted in to the shielded transactions. It's like it's great that you have the technology, but if nobody uses it even on its own chain, it's like, damn, that's not a good look from a privacy perspective.
Yeah, I mean, both the ring signatures of Monero and the I forgot what it's called, the ZK snarks for Zcash do seem very, very interesting. But I'm kind of with you. It seems very complex, and if I try and understand how these things work, and I go to their block explorers, I'm all over the place with it. I tried to work out how big Monero's chain was about probably a year or so ago now, and I ended up having to give up because it was too complex. Whereas you go into Decred, and one of the reasons I quite like the fact that it's opt-in and prunable and all the rest of it is I can see exactly what the data looks like, and 60% of the supply is mixed, but it doesn't really affect me in any way, being able to read what's going on chain, which is great. Eduardo's in the chat. Hey Eduardo, hope you're doing well. Long time no see. What's he saying there, Exodus?
He says, question for JYP: is it possible to integrate a Mimblewimble coin such as Grin, or there's one called Mimblewimble coin, into the Decred atomic swap DEX? There's also Beam. He says, I will listen to the playback and can't wait to hear what you say.
This is really, I would argue that this is a question for probably Buck. And then also it would require a fair amount of actually closely looking at how these Mimblewimble coins work. So the challenge with doing atomic swaps always boils down to the scripting support that is present in a given chain. So my understanding is that the challenge with Monero is that Monero basically ripped out the TX script stuff from Bitcoin, and correspondingly it has a very simplistic scripting system that it supports. As a function of that, it's very difficult. We have to basically make special, like a special swap process adjusted to work with Monero. Now, my guess would be is that I wouldn't be surprised to learn that something similar would occur with Mimblewimble. That is, that if Mimblewimble supports TX script, it's actually very easy, right? Because the scripts to do atomic swaps are very well known, and they're very established, and we know exactly how they go on with TX script. But when you go to as soon as you move away from that, it becomes much more, questionable as to whether we'll be able to do it. How easy is it to do? How much demand is there to do it? So that's sort of, what would determine that. And that would require a pretty close look at these, at these coins. And so it's a question of scripting system support. That's what I can say without having taken a close look at these things.
I'll say Beam has had atomic swaps for a few years now between Litecoin and Bitcoin. So I think adding those things is trivial. And I'll say that obviously the DCR DEX is completely open source. If they want to come along and do it, it's up to them. I don't think it's really up to, Decred developers to do work for these other coins, so to speak. So obviously it's open source software. If they like what they see in Bison Wallet, it's totally up to them to come by and do the work.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like, there's only so much work that's reasonable to, to do on our end for this stuff. It's like, hey, we supported a few things where, we picked some low hanging fruit, and then, we called it a day. If anybody wants to add it, they can add it. And I think that, the demand for proper decentralized exchange is going to increase as a function of time. I mean, if there's one thing that we can glean from these recent actions against, whatever it is, Samurai Wallet, which was shocking to me. As soon as I saw it, I was like, wow. I actually sat down and I read the what is it? Is it the complaint or the indictment. Yeah. So I read the indictment document, and it's like, I always read these things because I feel like the cryptocurrency media either intentionally gets it wrong or sort of like unintentionally gets it wrong because they listen to people who didn't sit down and read these things. It was unbelievable because basically, at least with it, there are a lot of people who were pissed off about Tornado Cash on principle, but they clearly didn't read the indictment. And when the indictment was unsealed, it was like, well, they screwed up, and they effectively, whether they used it or not, they had custody of these assets. And it's like, as soon as that happens, you are hosed. You take custody of these assets, you need to do AML KYC. If you don't do it, now you're in violation, and now you're a money launderer as much as a virtual crime. I consider that. But then, it's like, at least they got it kind of right with Tornado Cash, and I was expecting to see a similar mistake on part of Samurai Wallet, and I did not. I read it and I was floored when I read the indictment.
So was Samurai Wallet not taking custody and fees and stuff, or were they?
They were taking fees, but they were not taking custody. And that stood out to me as like, wow. Like, so basically anyone who ran, a non-custodial mixing service could be potentially caught on the wrong side of that, if you follow my drift.
Yeah. This is what I figured it was, actually, because I remember they were, they were basically charging for their service. And I think we alluded to this in the chat, that kind of conventional business models that take fees in that respect now are kind of not necessarily dead in the water, but they've certainly got to jump for a few more loopholes to make sure that they don't come unstuck with the anti-money laundering policies of certain countries and whatnot. And one of those, I can't remember which one it was, but I might be on a different one, actually. I thought because they got caught in Belgium or something, but I think that might have been a different wallet.
I think I could swear that it was either in Belgium or the Netherlands. Was that Tornado Cash? Is that what you were going to say, Mike?
Yeah, that does sound about right then. So so the fact that this was cross-border as well is quite interesting. So, but yeah, JP's just turned up in the chat as well. Says hi, cool to hear from you guys. Any other bits from you, Exitus, on privacy and the price action and whatnot?
No, I think we covered just about everything.
I know as a Decred kind of community, we tend not to get too heavy into the price, but it is nice to hear these thoughts, and it's nice to kind of know that they're we are thinking about this and that it's going forward in the right direction.
As far as price, I would just say if Decred can experience a sustained breakout that kind of instills confidence, I think it could do really, really well, especially with the ASIC miners. They're gone now, and the inflation and supply is all kind of leveling out. So I think that's kind of all we need at this point.
Yeah. So I mean, my next question, just to read from the crib sheet here, is we've obviously come 10 years now, or more than 10 years for you guys before the chain started and whatnot, and we've kind of completed all of the feature set from the original roadmap. Is it time to kind of put together another roadmap to see how the next chapter plays out? Have we got any ideas for what that might look like?
Yeah, so I think it's accurate to say that as this peer-to-peer mixing really, lands, there's probably another, I'd say 3 to 6 months to get it, to the point where I would argue that it's perfect or close to perfect. There's some anti-foot gun things we would want to add in there. There's some extra bits and bobs to add, but it is accurate to say that we are coming to the point where basically the base, the layer one chain is effectively feature complete. We've got a treasury, we've got a system for distributing the treasury, we've got privacy, we've got the ability to vote on consensus changes. All of this stuff works. There's ways to refine it and make it better, but I think that the future of Decred, and I think a lot of other cryptocurrencies is ultimately going to be found off chain. There's certain things that you need in the base chain, like these various features that we've just talked about, or I just listed, are features where you really can't do them at L2. It's like, well, what are you gonna do about the treasury at L2? It's like, well, so then someone has to custody it, right? So that has to be done at layer one. And then it's like, well, what about consensus rules? Consensus rules are necessarily a layer one, concept. We have to focus on that on layer one. So these things that really require layer one are mostly done. And I would argue by the end of, I guess it's, it's July 2024. I'd say by absolute latest mid 2025, the on-chain stuff will be mostly done to the point where it's like, hey, we might add some new scripts, or we might adjust some things here and there. But the future really is off-chain. And a couple of years ago, it's a year and a half now. A year and a half ago, this is why we released Bison Relay. It's because ultimately the future of not just Decred but cryptocurrency is going to be found off chain. Now, whether that means you're going to be using cryptocurrency to buy widgets online from a bricks and mortar store, or to buy digital goods, or just to communicate like we do with sort of like the base of it with Bison Relay, that's an open question, exactly how all that will fit together, how it'll be decentralized and so on. But that's really, in my opinion, what the focus, should be on moving forward. That is, in terms of, if we look at major societal, patterns, whether we're talking about just, the collective West, that is, Europe, the EU and Five Eyes, if we're just talking about this clump of Western countries are censoring stuff left and right, and it is not getting any better. It just continues to accelerate. It's like, all these laws passed in the EU about like, there's a central planning committee, and if they say something isn't true, then you have to ban it from the platform. And then how do you deal with content everywhere else? And it's like this idea that, that governments can turn off information that they don't like, or is inconvenient to them, or their governance systems or their financial systems, is going to become increasingly prevalent. I feel like, all we've seen for the past 2 or 3 or 4 years is an increase in societal disorder. I'm expecting a considerable increase in that societal disorder if anything happens over the next several years. And so, with that in mind, I think the idea of having communications infrastructure that is not censorable, that is, I can't go in and go, I don't like it when people use the wrong pronouns or whatever. I can't go in there. I can't even see, what anyone is communicating, about. So as a function of that, I feel like, that's really the path forward in terms of where human society is going and where Decred is going. Now, it's obviously a separate question if we can get people to opt into our system and participate, but I feel like that's a major societal ongoing, ongoing, steadily worsening societal problem. And we're trying to get in front of it and address it with, basically technology and better communications infrastructure. And that's the future of Decred.
Yeah, no, I really like the fact that you guys are thinking about the communication side, and Bison Relay, and I try and tell everyone this, but Bison Relay is just absolutely this work of absolute genius. The way that you guys have set up the kind of communication over Lightning Network, and the way it kind of passes to a server, but everything is encrypted, is absolutely amazing. And everything, all the communication is private, uncensorable. On various other live streams, we did have a few questions about, well, if you can't be censored, how do you control what's being said on the platform? How do you control making sure that there's no but this was the point that I was trying to make with these guys. In actual fact, a censor resistant platform is just that. There is no way of censoring it, but then there was the caveat to that, whereas if you don't want to see that nonsense, if you don't want to see these hate
turn it right off.
Turn it right off. And it comes back to a point that you were making in chat, is about these social media platforms and their algorithms. And I'll let you finish the sentence.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like everyone argues about these algorithms, and it's like, I mean, I see it. I suck at gaming these algorithms. You see me on Twitter, and my stuff is effectively invisible. Okay, that's great. But why is it invisible? It's because I suck at gaming these algorithms. Some people are exceptionally good at this, and I am not that guy. Like, I'm not the guy who's like, ooh, maybe I shouldn't say that because that's going to trip me into some, filter on Twitter or whatever. I just say what I say. And then it's like, oh yeah, now Jake's on another list. And so hey, then my content doesn't go anywhere. But what this obviates to me is really everyone argues about the algorithm, but I can tell you just flat out, the best algorithm is no algorithm. No one should be between it. Like, if you guys want to send me messages and say, Jake, I don't like you, the price action sucks, that's your fault or whatever, it should be on me to turn that off. If I don't want to hear it, I turn a switch and I turn that off. No one else should be like, oh yeah, I think Jake needs to hear that louder, or Jake needs to hear that quieter. People should be sovereign over their own communications. And I think that what's funny to me is that I think most people just don't realize it. They're on there because, their views happen to fit in a bubble that isn't actively, aggressively censored. And then they're like, oh, what censorship? I don't see any censorship. And it's like, well, try talking about, topics A, B, and C, and we'll see what happens to your communications infrastructure real quick. And so I think that, as things progress, I think as things come unglued financially and economically in the West, we're going to see a lot more censorship, because people are, the people who've historically been in control are losing control. And so how do they reassert that control? Well, they used to be able to sort of like nudge you to buy houses and buy crap you don't need and appliances. Well, when the economy dumps real hard, it's going to be very hard to nudge people to do that stuff. So then it's like, well, what do we do? Well, we'll just turn off their communications or make it so they can't talk to their friends. And it's like, well, we're seeing the tip of the spear, and it's going right in.
I loved your point on this when we was having this conversation in one of the chats. I think it was like Trading Talk, and it was basically, the best algorithm is just not to have one. And how much more simple does that actually make the platform as well? You say, right, if you don't want to hear that, if you don't hear that person or group, you don't have to join it, or you mute them. And all this idea of what do you call it, covert censorship or whatever, where I'm talking to certain people, but they're the only people I'm allowed to talk to, and you don't realize that that's happening until you try to reach out of that circle. And it is crazy actually. And I particularly like that about Bison Relay, and I'm really enjoying that. I'm trying at the moment to publish all of my content on the Bison Relay newsfeed. I'm loving that experience as well. It's good. And tipping people.
I try to publish stuff like every day, every other day. I know that not everybody wants to engage with the kind of crazy shit that I post, but that happens. That's how I roll, and I'm used to it. I'm a grown up, and people don't want to engage.
Absolutely. I tend to try and engage with most things, but I'm not. I don't tend to have very much to say. A lot of it goes over my head, unfortunately. So, but I do like to hear it. I do like to see it. The zero hedge posts that you put up are always insightful. Actually, I read through most of them. Yeah.
I know not everybody likes zero hedge, so I try to keep it tight. So if I'm going to post a zero hedge link, it's like one of the better ones. It's like, okay, I've read 100 of these things. This is like top 5% material, so that people aren't like, oh, this is garbage, or
I like to hear different opinions, and certainly your posts always give me that, and so does Zero Hedge and things like that. And it's always nice. And talking to Dave Collins on Bison Relay is always, it just blows my mind sometimes. I love it. And it's things that you're not going to get on Twitter. These conversations that can go deep into the nuts and bolts, they're not happening on Twitter. They are happening on Bison Relay, and you can go for your chat list. You can contact somebody and say, hey, how does this work? And that level of communication is actually amazing.
I get more engagement out of like 30 people on Bison Relay than I do out of Twitter for years. Like if I ask the question, when was the last time somebody made a substantive comment in reply to anything I posted on Twitter? It's like, what, a year ago? And it's like, I'm on Bison Relay, and people will be like, oh, well, what was it? Exitus pointing out that people have been freshly introduced to this classic Latin American, crime technique of being robbed on a scooter. It's like, yeah, that's more substantive than almost anything anyone posts on Twitter. It's just, Twitter is just signal to noise ratio is awful. And if you're lucky, your content sort of gets replicated and spread around. But if you're like me, it's like, who knows how many lists I'm on, or how many like microservice censorship lists I'm on. And so it's like, even if I post something and everybody who saw it liked it, it's like, it's not going anywhere. Nobody else is seeing that crap.
I think a couple of weeks ago, I went through and I saw about 3 or 4 of your posts, and now it's gone dead again. I haven't seen you for at least over a week now. So on Twitter, whereas going to Bison Relay, I see Jake every day.
Yeah. So it's more fun to hang out places where I can actually talk to people, as opposed to like, I post it, maybe I get a like, maybe I get a retweet, but never real engagement. And then of course it's like Twitter behaves really weird for me. Like, let me give you an example. Sometimes I'll log in, doesn't show any notifications. Sometimes I'll check a post that I've made, and I never got a notification that people replied. there are 3 or 4 replies. Why did I never get a notification? Something is definitely wonky with Twitter, or my Twitter at least. So that, you know, who the hell knows? I mean, I can't fix that algorithm. I can fix the Bison Relay algorithm. I can't fix that one.
I have to go into my messages to see if they're there before they actually show up. It's crazy. Exitus, how are you getting on?
It's quite funny. You sign up to Bison Relay, which is very cypherpunk. It's all encrypted. There's no censorship, and then you get to read Jake's landscaping posts. I always enjoy that.
Yeah.
It's very, very wholesome, because people are like, "Oh, if you create this censorship, there's no censorship. People are going to post insane things and all these bad things." And you go on, it's like these very wholesome, like I'm fixing my roof, and
yeah, bro, I'm using this tool, and this one works way better than the others. Like I tried 3 tools. The first 2 were garbage. The third one was actually really good. It took like it's a total rip-off tool. Is like $200 for a bunch of, a small thing made out of welded steel, but it works great. So, I'll take it over a $40 tool that basically doesn't work.
But yeah, I think Bison Relays, it's great technology. It's super, super interesting. What you guys are going to continue to build on it. But at the same time, I acknowledge, like, the world's on Twitter, and in Bison Relays mainly the Decred community, and it's a pain to deal with these algorithms and trying to get reach and all these other things. But I've had some successes on Twitter, and I've communicated with some people. There's also, if you have Twitter Blue, it helps you a little bit. So I think the fight is on Twitter, and if we can bring more people to Decred and Bison Relay, because let's be honest, if you want to get into Bison Relay, you have to be in Decred. You have to own Decred. So we'll see what happens. Some of the DCR Dex devs said they might implement a Bison Relay troll box into Bison Wallet. So a troll box is kind of this like anonymous chat room that's right on the exchange, and people can kind of say things about price. And historically, it's been a lot of fun. So I think that would be a great development.
Troll box, man. Troll box brings back like Poloniex memories, and just being like, man, I remember I watched the troll box for Decred like for 5 minutes there, and I was like, whoa, this is too much. I can't watch. It's like, it's overwhelming. It's like and that was when it was like really hot. It was like people would just be like on there just talking the craziest shit, and you're like, what? It's 10 times crazier than trading.
Yeah, and on BitMEX, which is still up, they report when people get liquidated. So it's like it's people talking and then people just losing all their money. It's really crazy.
Well, I guess you have to have margin, which means you need to have custody to get liquidated, right?
I don't think they have custody, not on BitMEX.
Really?
No, I don't think so.
I thought BitMEX was a centralized exchange.
Oh, right. Yeah, the exchange is custody. Yes, not the users. Correct.
Yes, yeah. That's what I was getting at. Is that like, if you like to get liquidated, you need margin. To get margin, you need custodial exchange, right? So yeah, that was.
Yeah, Trollbox could be quite interesting. I think if it's as exciting as the trading channel on Matrix, then yeah. It's absolutely mental stuff. So just to kind of come back to that first point I made, so the way Decred is heading then is obviously looking at things like Bison Relay, the off-chain processes, and we've already seen, if you're a contractor at least, we've already started to see a few of these services kind of turn up in Bison Relay. And I wanted to ask you your thoughts on the CMS platform and the Politeia. Is that all coming to Bison Relay? Is it? I know CMS is already halfway there. What's the progress on that?
Yeah. So CMS is already on there. That's the contractor management system. That's how everybody gets paid. We figured we'd start with that because then everybody who gets paid has to be on Bison Relay. And it's sort of involuntary. It's like you gotta consume the Decred to get the Decred. So we started there, and then ultimately we will move Politeia onto there. And then it ends up that basically Bison Relay reproduces a lot of the features that we added into Politeia. So there's a whole bunch of stuff on Politeia where it's like, oh, we want it to be cryptographic. Oh, we want to have a fee-gated posting process. And so like all of that is like native to Bison Relay. So that will make, basically porting it a lot easier. I don't think it's going to be a very huge project, but the other part of the reason we do that is that Politeia is a mess to maintain. It's a non-trivial, sized code base that, you know, a lot of people who were working on it previously have left the project. So as a function of that, it's like sort of like unmaintained stuff. Then when it breaks, it's like, oh, wow, now we got to get in there. We got to like poke around and see what's what and try to fix it. And that process, it's not easy to maintain. The other thing we found is that when we went from, so the old CMS was basically a fork of Politeia with stuff added or stuff changed. Well, the new one, it was just standalone. And so as a function of doing it standalone, what we ended up getting is, I mean, CMS is a few thousand lines of code. There's not a whole lot to it. So we've had a massive reduction in complexity in terms of going from the old CMS to the new CMS. And our hope is that we have a similar reduction in complexity going from the old Politeia to the new Politeia. And then what we could do is we had actually discussed, you know, making it visible over the web, but to post, you need to get on Bison Relay. So you want to post, you need to come on Bison Relay, you need to make your post there. And then the same thing would go with like proposal credits. So that maps onto there. And then what we would do is we would probably have like a read-only copy of it that we put up on a website, so that we can basically throw out all the dynamic back-end JavaScript stuff. So if you want to follow Politeia, you know, or the proposals on the web, you can. And if you want to participate, you got to get on Bison Relay.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I was wondering about that. Was going to be my next question. So CMS is on the online version, the web version of CMS is going to be completely gone if it isn't already.
Yeah. I think we still have it running just as sort of like a backup. We try to do the parallel system thing where it's like, if we're going to cut over to a new system, we keep both systems running for a while and then we turn the old one off.
Yeah, because it's useful for past invoices and stuff like that, I should imagine.
Exactly. And what we probably should do is we probably should like export the data and then pull it over to the new system, and then maybe have like a manual authentication process to be like, oh, you were user X on the old site. On the old site, okay, well, we'll give you control and access to the records for user X on Bison Relay.
Yeah, brilliant. So in terms of the Politeia, then, so you're going to have this read-only front end. So if you want to go and see the latest proposals, see the latest comments, you can do that. But buying credits, posting new proposals, posting comments, that's all going to be done via Bison Relay.
Directly, yes, yeah. It would make life a lot easier. We don't have to support two systems in parallel. Most of the commenting and the replies and all that stuff is already working on Bison Relay when you make posts. So if you make posts, you can do comments, there's threaded replies, and basically the same thing would work for the proposal system.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
Is there any plan to add Bison Relay directly into Decrediton, so like the whole process is a little bit more streamlined? Because you already have a lot of users already running an SPV node, and there's already Lightning Network support in Decrediton.
I think that's possible. The part of the reason that we didn't do that was, if you want to run this as a standalone, like I'm a computer security nut, and so if I have a wallet that, let's say, has, I don't know, 100,000, 10,000 Decred or whatever in it, I'm not going to want to connect that to something that has, something that I don't need to connect it to. So that was really the idea, is that you would have these things separate. That is, that the Decrediton, we could try to link it, but to be honest, I think that I worry about complexity going into the Bison Relay client, because we're going to have to add a whole bunch of basically screens and knobs and like the ability to basically hook it up to an existing Decrediton install. We could it's definitely possible, but it's Bison Relay is built with a built-in DCR LND, and then that has a built-in DCR wallet. So it's always possible to connect to an external, to replace the local built-in DCR LND with a nominally remote one, even if it's remote on the same machine. So that's possible. It's just a question of ease of use and exposing the buttons and the knobs.
Yeah, that makes sense. From a security point of view, I kind of wouldn't want my main funds in with the software that I use to communicate with emails and whatnot. So,
and something that, since we were on the topic of mixing earlier, something that should be pretty easy to do is that if you're mixing your Decred, You mix your Decred, you take a small amount of your mixed Decred and send that to a, send that to your Bison Relay client, and then use those funds. That is a very effective way to basically compose privacy with the off-chain communications, platform.
Yeah. Oh, am I gone off? Yeah, I'm on. Yeah, it makes complete sense to me. Actually, I've always thought that they're probably better off being two different things. I think of my Decrediton as my kind of like my Vault, and my Bison Relay as my kind of web browser, which maybe. That's absolutely great to see that these things have been thought of, and that we're bringing in all of this infrastructure. And most of what happens on Politaire and CMS is all off chain anyway. So it's quite nice to see that they're all getting merged into one. It's also nice to see that a lot of the problems with all the people leaving has been addressed, and we're going to simplify that whole process. And I think in the proposal, not proposal, the contractor group a few years back, people were saying this already, like, we need to simplify this, because there was already starting to be a few little glitches, especially in CMS. So that's really cool. The next things, and I haven't tried these yet, so maybe Exitus might be the better person to ask this, but how is the BR mobiles going? How's that working out? Mobiles, sorry.
It's with the latest update, it works really well in my experience. So before there was a few issues where you'd exit out of it and the app would stop, but from what I've seen, it works fine. So they did a really good job.
I've been trying to keep it running continuously on my phone now for several weeks. The fixes that came with the 0.20 release, and then with the 2.00 release of the core software, that has been a major turning point for the mobile app. And so this is the part about running Bison Relay on mobile that I learned about the hard way, right? Which is Bison Relay actually has to maintain quite a bit of state. That's because it has it has a Lightning Network daemon, and then it has an on-chain wallet component. Each of those components has to track the chain. So the embedded wallet tracks the chain, and then you need that to happen for LND to, DCR LND to work correctly. So that amount of state tracking is greater than most applications on most phones. Most applications on most phones are like, oh, when you press a button, I send data, or when you press a button, I fetch data. And so basically, when nothing is going on, it's very quiet and it's very light on the CPU and on the battery. So we've had to work pretty hard to go from something that runs on the command line and something that runs on the desktop to get something on mobile, because of the amount of state it has to maintain. So now we've got it pretty stable. Like, for example, the app will run for several days on my phone without any event in the background. Under a lot of circumstances, its battery draw is very low, and even in comparison to apps like Signal, which have very little state that they have to maintain. That is, that they have very little network traffic and very little updates to make to them when they're idle or in the background. So we've got this. It's to the point where it's usable. It's not to the point where it's fully optimized. We're still fighting with some battery issues, where sometimes it will really chew through the battery and other times it won't. So we're still trying to really untangle what's going on there and how to fix it. I mean, that's one thing that I wasn't anticipating with going to mobile. And I think it was because I wasn't thinking about Bison Relay from the perspective of it being an always on app, right? If you're going to use something like this, you want it always on so you can receive messages and stuff. And then that means something has to be listening in the background. That means that, LND, DCR LND has to run. That means DCR wallet has to run. All these things have to run in order for the infrastructure to work. And when you're on a laptop, that's not a significant battery draw problem, but on mobile, it's an issue. So that's we're learning about this. I mean, the other thing, of course, is that we've learned that most other communications tools use their app store caches, right? It'll be like, it uses whatever it's called, Firebase Cloud Messenger, which is really just it used to be Google Cloud Messenger. And so it's like, well, you don't want your messages on there. That sort of defeats the purpose of using Bison Relay. So then you have to do everything, internal to the app. So we've focused on doing it right, as opposed to kind of half-assing it and making it not private. So it's like we followed a lot of the design decisions that Signal made, and then we've had to make a lot of sort of Bison Relay specific, optimizations in order to make it really pop. So that's why it took a while.
That's absolutely great. But this is just Android at the minute, isn't it? What's the expectation for iOS?
We can make it go to iOS without too much work. And the reason I say too much work is that the way we've built it is really it's built for Android. And we figured we'd start with Android because there's actual utility in having an APK. That is, if you're running Graphene or you're willing to sideload apps, there's no app store, there's no app store barred across. Whereas, once you start getting into app stores, they can deny it. You have to fill out a bunch of paperwork. It's basically a bunch of nonsense that you have to do in order to get these things onto the app stores. And I actually, I anticipated that iOS would actually be the toughest one to get on, because historically they do not, they always want a fee, right? They always want to cut. So if every transaction you're sending, or if every message you send is like a micropayment, it's like, well, crap, how do we, if they start pressing on that front, how do we get the app to, pass muster for them? They're like, well, somebody's making money here. And it's like, dude, it's like 0.0001 cents. It's like, we're not, nobody's making bank while Apple, stands there with their hat out for change. It's like, so that was part of our apprehension. Not to mention, we wanted to get the UI and UX and then battery optimizations right. So we focused on those, but we will make an attempt to do the iOS thing, but we may run into substantial issues with their fee model.
Yeah, I'd like to see them trying to split an atom. A single atom. I want my cut. It's like, it doesn't go any lower than that.
They're like, we need these atoms. And then it's like, well, we don't want the atoms. We actually want the dollars. And it's like, well, that's not how it works. You either get the stuff or you get the... So that's kind of that's what my concern about iOS is, that I'm keen to get it onto iOS, but I'm also very, very aware of the constraints when it comes to iOS.
Yes, I mean, one of the things that I'm quite looking forward to, and I might go and buy an Android and get install the Graphene, is it called? Because I want an always-on Bison Relay. For some reason, the Mac computers that I use, if you close the lid, everything turns off, and actually trying to keep something on is an almost impossibility. So yeah, I think maybe that might be the other option, especially as we move forward. And I'm quite looking forward, and this is my next point, I'm quite looking forward to starting a Bison Relay store. And obviously at that point, I'm going to need to have an always on version of Bison Relay. And I'm quite looking forward to kind of making some different things, maybe a marketplace, but I quite like the idea of starting a kind of education sort of platform where you can subscribe to videos and watch the videos and things like that. So I'm watching that very closely. But that was my next question. How is the storefronts coming on, and when will we GUI, the graphic interface users, be able to start building stores?
Well, what we're working on is that one thing that we did that was a very intentional choice on my part, and I got a little bit of pushback from the devs, is to not use the web as basically the basis for the user interface. Now, the reason I did this is because it's a kitchen sink solution. It's a turnkey solution. You can be like, oh, look, now I can have these like widgets, and now I can make my web page look like every other web page out there. But I know what that means. What that means is that the mega bloated corporate only tool chain system from the web would then be present on Bison Relay. And I mean, this is a massive problem for the web, which is that you go, okay, like, oh, you want to make your own web browser, which I did with Marco back in the day. And it rapidly turns into everything depends on your toolkit that you end up having. So if that toolkit changes in any way, your features will, can literally all break, which happened to us. That is, we used to run a privacy-focused browser, which was originally called XXXterm, and then we rebranded it to Zombrero, and basically the toolkit we were using changed out from under us and broke. So with that in mind, what we're doing is that we've rebuilt basically the user interface side of things from scratch. So before we really lean into the store thing, we have more work to do. And there's a progression of steps that we're working on to finish this. The first one that we figured we'd start with was make what's effectively an equivalent of a web form for creating invoices on CMS, so that people don't need to submit CSV invoices. You can basically make it in a page using a form. So that's us going, okay, how should forms really be done? Then to get to the point where stores are really something that pops in the GUI, we need to do something similar for the graphical side. That is, the stores would work fine as is, but then, like, let me give you an example. You have a store, maybe there's 3 pictures for some object or for some item. On the web, there's all kinds of tooling for you to display that stuff. We don't have any of the tooling. We are recreating the tooling from scratch. So I would say in the next, 6 months, to expect something where you can say, have the pictures in place and like have it look like a normal, sort of web storefront. And the idea with the storefront there is obviously it's broad. You could put anything there. You could put videos. You could put adult content. You could put whatever it is you want there, and then sell it online. The other thing is that you have to remember too is it for digital goods, this is very simple, right? It's like there's a file, you pay an amount, you can download the file, right? That's simple in comparison to a physical store. Physical stores are tricky because now you need a courier service. Now you need to charge people shipping. What's your zip code? What zip code are you shipping from? Like, what status is the ordering? There's all this extra state that has to be maintained and verified and updated. And that really, historically on the web, that's like a whole people's whole software project could be, I write web e-commerce software. So basically it's almost an entire separate additional project to do that. Despite that, we actually have a lot of the nuts and the bolts done, but we don't have the user interface side working as nicely as I would like. So we could start to see some rudimentary stuff pretty soon on Bison Relay, but I think the reality is that getting something closer to what people would expect or want will probably take a little bit longer, because we need to tune up we need to basically create the toolkits and the tooling so that people can build this stuff themselves.
I would note that I've used a simple store on Bison Relay, and it was absolutely amazing. Like I say, the design was very basic, but it already had a shopping cart, a buy button, and an invoicing system. So as soon as I bought the product, it posted me an invoice. Hey, you just got this, and then it went off into my downloads, which I thought was absolutely amazing. So, but obviously the user design isn't there, but the fact that it all already works is pretty impressive.
I happen to know that you're very good at testing things. So if we give you something to test, you will test it and you will be like, whoa, it works or it doesn't work, or here's what's going on with it. But I think that you also have to remember the average person is like, the picture's in the wrong place. It's unusable, or like the background's supposed to be cornflower blue, and like it's garbage if it's not cornflower blue. That's what I recognize that's the reality of people who use softwares. There's a lot of people who are like focused on this irrelevant side junk, and if they can't have it their way, it's the highway. So it's like, so from our perspective, the technical people and people who are good at pushing buttons and are like, oh, I pay attention to things on the screen and it's not just a color and like flashing lights, we're like, whoa, it works. Look, you can press the buttons. It does what it's supposed to. And other people are like, but it's the wrong color, so we're trying. I'm trying to get towards so we can satisfy the wrong color people.
Yeah, it's definitely not design proficient for the standard internet, but in terms of functionality, yeah, it worked seamlessly, which was absolutely amazing. So, like you say, going to that next step is obviously something different, but really appreciate all the effort that's going in there. In terms of the real world stuff, I also like the idea of the register app, where you could do. It's still the same principles, I would imagine, as a digital product, but more like like a restaurant where I don't know if you do this in America or not, but we go to a restaurant, we open up the app for that restaurant, we order the food, and then it comes to our table. that sort of thing maybe. But so many different use cases. Certainly the physical posting of objects is something we've discussed in many of the channels, and it always comes back to the trusted element, which is problematic, isn't it?
Custody, right?
Yeah. Exus, any further points on that?
No, I don't have anything. I think, Bison Relay is coming along nicely. The latest update makes it look a bit like Telegram a bit more. So it's been nice to see those, steady flow of developments, and it's just getting better and better. We have one question from UTXO Base. He says, is there any updates on the suppressor?
Well, okay, so here's some thoughts. Here's the thoughts on the suppressor. The suppressor is whoever runs the monolithic bot on Binance. Here's something to think about. Monero recently was booted from Binance. Okay. Well, what happened after they were booted from Binance? They started to experience what I think it would be fair to describe as organic positive price action. What can you infer from that? My inference from that is that whatever the suppressor is presumably something that spans multiple cryptocurrencies. This is not a Decred specific thing. I know that we speak about it in a Decred specific context, but I would find it entirely unsurprising that that the suppressor, whatever organization or group that is, operates across many cryptocurrencies, including Monero. And what we can do is we can infer their power and their influence from their absence. From Monero's absence on Binance, which Binance is, as best I can tell, their chosen venue. That's where they like to act most, and they're very entrenched there. So to see Monero, basically the time correlation of Monero's delisting from Binance combined with positive price action, that to me speaks to, hey, Monero is obviously a separate project. It's strong, it has good fundamentals, but also I predicted as soon as I think I even made a comment to Fluffy Pony about it. He was something about like, oh, there's talk about Binance getting delisted from Monero, and I'm like, it's probably going to be a boon for Monero, because then whoever the market maker is won't be able to manipulate your guys' price anymore. And it's like, well, sure enough, it's like now you got positive price action going, as long as you can sort of stay out of their crosshairs. And so exactly how they operate, who exactly they are, it's hard to say. But the suppressor is the real deal, and they're still present on Binance for Decred. So people will gaslight me and claim like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, blah 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 blah. Watch the DCR USD tether, watch the DCR tether pair on Binance. Ask yourself the question: are there really hundreds of people who all have all that Decred on Ask? No way. It's a monolithic bot that has a huge amount of Decred on Ask. And it probably, it wouldn't surprise me to learn that it's the entire bid side too. So somebody has effectively a market maker / market manipulator bot that runs on Binance, and it's going to do what it's going to do. I can't really control it. I just know that it's there, and I know roughly how it operates. Don't depend on chart signals too much, because they seem to like to paint those chart signals. So that's my take on the suppressor. It's like, you can try to bang your head against a wall all day and try to fight it, but it's there and it's a thing. And my read is that even though we've cited it, it's sort of like a whale, right? It's like we've cited the whale, but it's present everywhere is my read. That is, almost every major cryptocurrency is likely dealing with this issue, whether they recognize it or not.
Do you think so? The newest release of Bison Wallet's going to have arbitrage bots with Binance. Do you think those bots and that feature is going to help maybe fight this?
I think it can help. I think it depends a lot on how dedicated people are to the process of battling with the mega bot on Binance. Because you have to remember, it's, our bots will allow you to have flow from one location to another, but it doesn't necessarily clear out inventory. So if somebody has, 100,000, 200,000 Decred on Ask, how much of that Ask will get, eroded by our bots? It depends. It depends. I mean, if you got a good system and you think you can arb them and arb effectively, it could make a huge difference. So it's really up to every individual trader to do what they think they can and do what they actually can. I would say this is that a piece of advice I would give is that it strikes me as unlikely if you're going to try to have a bot that really battle, like a high frequency trading bot. I would advise against trying to battle them directly on Binance, because they control the ground there, whoever it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good point. And excuse me, if you think about it, if the suppressor situation was going on, it was going on for 6 years without interruption at 60% of the supply. So I think when we cut in with the first proposal, the coin supply was at 13 million. So you're talking 60% of that as a possibility, and this could go on for a little bit longer. We're currently at just over 2 years and a year and a bit from the second consensus change, aren't we? So I'm thinking, well, talking to Dave last time, it's certainly done some damage to them, and it's certainly reduced the amount. But I wouldn't be surprised to see if they haven't still got 400,000 up to 1 million in supply at hand for the next big pump. So yeah, be careful. Those are bots for sure.
I mean, my take too is, and we were talking about this a little bit, before we got on this call, is I think that something that's important to consider here is that the Western world as we know it, and I mean, I would say the rest of the world with it, is sort of heading into a disordered phase where the order that characterized, say, most of our younger years is going to be upended. And I say this because, say, like, look at the US dollar, right? The rates are, the federal funds rate is getting hiked, and inflation is still running very hot here. I mean, I keep seeing prices go up. I see the prices of shipping constantly increasing. And this can only go on for so long before the economy implodes. And then it's like, okay, well, if the economy implodes, it's like, what are you going to do? Are you going to keep hiking rates? Are you going to drop rates? If you drop rates, then inflation is going to get worse. I think that this is a problem everywhere. And then you go, okay, well, what's the common element? This is all, socialized, what is it, like welfare programs or variations thereupon, like, entitlement spending. So everyone in the Western world is having the same problem. There's a huge number of people on an entitlement, on entitlement rolls, whether it's like Social Security or it's Medicare or it's, welfare or whatever it is in Europe or in the UK. And so these things are getting overloaded, and the only way that the governments, each of their respective governments, know how to deal with them is to rig the inflation statistics so that they can lie and keep the cost of living adjustments low when they should really be 2 or 3x what they claim. So this pattern is not specific to the United States. And so I'm expecting basically a large macroeconomic problem to rear its head in the next little while. It wouldn't surprise me if they try to drop it on Trump, if he does win in November. So I think things could get very hectic. And then you ask the question, well, what the hell does this have to do with Decred? And I think that cryptocurrency as a sector is going to experience a huge surge in interest if and when that happens. And I think that the when is pretty soon. So when things like this happen, I think that the suppressor, who knows, maybe the suppressor will run out of inventory. These things could happen, but I think that it's important to keep this bigger macroeconomic picture in mind when talking about cryptocurrency price action and just sort of like bull and bear markets.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think about it as one of the reasons I got into cryptocurrency and then into Decred is because I wanted to hedge my savings, actually, because I was seeing it just every year on year, and I've told this story many times, but every year we'd have this big pot of money in September, and you just see it erode, and it's like, well, why am I not able to hold on to that? And one of the things that happened to me almost instantly getting into crypto and Decred was all of a sudden I was able to save, and it didn't impact on any of those things. And all of a sudden it was like, well, the pound's still eroding very, very quickly, but the amount that I was able to accumulate in crypto year on year, and even now during these ridiculously low times, has accumulated. And I see that when it flips, that's when it becomes really interesting. And I mean, I have a lot longer viewpoint on these things than most people I talk to. And it was really, to me, is how can I keep my savings? How can I make sure that if shit does happen, that I manage to have a pension in the next 20 years when I end up having to fully retire? So, and it's one of the reasons I got into this field. It's like, well, let's try it. Let's see if doing something different will actually help. And so far, it's not even, we've gone through these massive, really hard times with crypto, but not once have I seen the level of my investment go down. It may have gone down from the absolute peak, but it's never gone down lower than what I've actually put in, which is quite interesting. Whereas my pounds, every year we have this pot, and every year it just goes out the window. And it's a really interesting experiment, actually. And when you see it as a hedge, and people should be hedging for their future, for whether that's crypto, whether that's gold, whether that's some kind of pension. It doesn't make any sense to me that you wouldn't.
I was just looking at the comments over here from Air, Sand, and Fire about how the economy will implode anytime now for decades. Never happens. I get a big kick out of this because it's like, hey, I've been bearish on the economy for a long time, but things the basically as soon as the rates the Fed started hiking rates in early 2022, things have really changed here. I don't know if Air, Sand, and Fire is from the U.S. or not, but I see it here. It's the prices. Inflation has gone out of control. There are people online who are like, I reordered $130 of stuff from 5 years ago, and now it costs 4x, 4 times as much. Like 4 years later, it's like that to me, that's insane. And then it's like according to the truth on paper, it's a 25% inflation in the cost of living. That is garbage. And anybody who has 2 eyes and a brain knows that. And so it's like seeing where the economy is going lately is really alarming. And I mean, here's something to think about, which is if we take numbers like CPI, so the claim from the Fed is one of its mandates is to target like roughly, stable prices, right? Which means 2 to 3% inflation a year. Well, what do they mean by inflation? They mean CPI. Well, what does CPI mean? If you adjust CPI and you go, okay, well, what CPI used to be the inflation, like the inflation number, or what is it? They called it, what was it called? Cost of living index. So that used to be calculated I think it started in the UK in the mid 1700s up through current. And it's like, okay, well, what happened to that? Well, the politicians got a hold of it in the United States, and they're like, well, we got to create this CPI thing because the actual cost of living is going up way too fast, and the federal government won't have enough money to pay for all of our socialized Ponzi's. And so they had to come up with a statistic to slow the bleed rate down, and that's what CPI is. And then you go, okay, well, what is the cost of living index versus CPI? CPI at 2%. I mean, according to John Williams, who runs shadowstats.com, the claim is that it's a flat 7% greater. So that the actual inflation is CPI of 2%, inflation is 9%. And then you ask the question, has there been an economic recovery post 08? Once you include a flat 7% increase in inflation, it doesn't really seem like it to me, because then you're going like, oh, it's 2%, 3% CPI. That's 9 or 10%. The economy would have to grow every year just to beat inflation. And that's like, that's not happening. And I feel like it hasn't happened, so this idea that the economy is in the garbage, it is, but it's a question of when is it going to implode? It's not a question of if, it's a question of when, because it's like, you can only do the dog and pony show for so long. And then eventually it's like, oh man, all the interest payments on all this debt is crushing. So that's sort of like, it's inevitable. And in fact, I mean, my read is that's why a lot of people in the crypto space got involved in the first place, is they're like, oh, this is unsustainable post 08.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, anyone just living on a fixed income will already tell you how tight things have got. But there's an interesting question just come in, actually. Let's move on just a little bit, because obviously we've gone well over the hour.
Sorry, that one definitely triggered a rant from me. I got a rant for
good. I like a good rant. UTXO based says, can Decred implement a long tail inflation like Monero instead of the 21 million like BTC?
We can literally do anything we want. It's Decred. You know, the rules, we can change the rules to do whatever we want. But my take is that, you know, if nothing else, the congestion on BTC has demonstrated that even if there were no block reward, the fees are enough to basically feed the system. And then if you even look outside the cryptocurrency space, in my opinion, PayPal is a demonstrator for the, you know, the fact that this is viable. You can make a fee-based, you know, payment, transmission and you know, value storage and transmission system that operates entirely on fees. So the idea that there needs to be a tail inflation is misguided, I think. That is that, you know, the fees from transactions will make up for the difference. That is that, oh, you know, basically there isn't much of a fee market right now. But in the future, there definitely could be a fee market, and the fees could be, you know, more than enough to pay miners to create the incentive to keep mining blocks. The other thing is just like we turned down the proof of work component, we could turn it back up. You know, we can with Decred, we can really do whatever we need to in order to you know, make the chain hum.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. My follow on from that would be, and maybe I need to think about this a little bit more actually, but in terms of staking, because at the moment none of the fees for transactions go to staking, and that could be something else that could be considered there, is it? That
Oh yeah, I mean, we just like everything else in Decred is, you know, we could change these things, and we've you know, I've discussed that to a limited extent with Dave C a few times. That is that, at some point, should we start slicing up how the transaction fees are allocated? We don't feel the need to do it just yet, but at some point in the future, we could definitely do something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Any further questions, Exitus? We're at an hour 20 minutes, so we should probably start wrapping up a little bit. But any pressing questions?
I don't have any at the moment. I would maybe just ask Jake how he feels about the direction of maybe marketing. And obviously we've been in a bear market for some time, and marketing in bear markets doesn't have much effect. But as we move towards a potential bull market towards the end of the year or in early 2025, what methods do you think might work, or something you might want to pursue, or just your general thoughts?
You know, I'm actually, as a function of the, you know, layer one becoming mostly feature complete, I'm actually planning to make a bit of a marketing pivot here. And I think that it's, I probably should have been working on this more in the past, but, you know, I'm more of a, you know, nuts and bolts person than a hype person. That said, I'm also the kind of person, I've done many different things in my life, and, you know, up to and including landscaping, quite a bit of that lately. And so as a function of doing these things, you know, I've learned that I can pick things up very, very quickly. So I think that we're overdue for sort of a marketing shift, in hopes of, you know, sort of focusing more on the marketing side and less on the technological side. We already have the technology, so it's a question of just, you know, sort of onboarding people and spreading the gospel, if you will. You know, maybe with a little bit less ideology.
I think I've got a question maybe for both of you, but is it time to start thinking about getting another PR firm and maybe getting Lindsay back?
I'll be honest here. I don't. I think Jake left. Jake, you there?
Yeah, no. I'm here. I was waiting for you to go ahead. You go ahead.
I feel like the internet maybe has moved on from kind of publications and PR work. It's like people just read what's on Twitter or what's on their phone, and I feel like it's maybe a little bit outdated. And if you look at what the kind of content Lindsay was getting, it was kind of this, you know, these amateur sites that didn't have much reach, and I just feel like it's a lot of money for not much effect. And, you know, Decreds, we've tried the PR route for years, and it really didn't work, and there's a lot of money spent. I think there needs to be a more, you know, novel approach.
I'm with Exitus on this, which is that we've thrown a lot of spaghetti over the years, and I feel like I mean, what was it, that the Polkadot marketing spend data got leaked? Holy moly! Like, it's like tens of millions of dollars, and it's like it's rare when I see something that to me is like kind of a new conspiracy, because I feel like I've seen it all. But when they were like, when they talked about how much they were spending, I thought to myself, I haven't heard a word about Polkadot in who knows how long. And I know my Twitter feed is all kinds of messed up because of things I post, but it was like, I can't even remember the last time I saw anything about Polkadot. So it's like, I feel like Polkadot could be on some kind of list. Like somebody's like, oh no, we don't like Polkadot at Twitter. Put them on the list. So it's like, you can spend tens of millions of dollars and still have like be invisible on these platforms. I mean, Twitter is still the platform for cryptocurrency, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so even on there, you spend $30 million, I mean, a year or half a year. And it's like, I haven't even seen a single post from those people. That's crazy to me.
It feels like them leaking that got way more exposure than any actual marketing they did.
Yeah, part of me thinks it was calculated. Somebody had the same reaction as I did, which was like, I've never even seen anything about Polkadot on here. What are you guys spending? Oh my God. And then they're like, well, let's leak it, right? But at the same time, I think that what it obviates is it obviates that doing conventional stuff does not work for cryptocurrency, whether it's platforms manipulating content or whatever it is, or it's people's attention spans, whatever it is, the typical way of marketing does not work. I mean, here's a story from back in my CipherTight days. We had like a high security online storage product. We spent, I don't know, a few $100,000 doing online marketing and like search ads and stuff. We got nothing from it, nothing, zero, to the point where I was like, we may as well have just set our money, taken the money out of the bank as banknotes, made a video, set it on fire, and that would have gotten us more engagement. They would have been like, look at all that money, he's burning all that money. And then that would have gotten us more engagement than actually paying for these advertisements. So it's like, I feel like marketing in the cryptocurrency space is like a total exercise in being ineffective. So as much as I feel like, hey, I could throw shade at any particular marketing person we've had, it's like either King Midas invests in you and then you suddenly appear in all of these publications, or you end up in this PR, sort of like rut where you pay PR firms and then don't ever get the coverage that you would hope to get. So there's got to be a third path. And I feel like, we don't have a King Midas, so King Midas strategy is out. And then, we've tried the marketing thing, 6 ways from Sunday. I mean, I think, going to trade shows is incredibly expensive. It's a huge waste of money. So you spend tens of thousands of dollars to get a booth or to get a speaking slot or whatever, and then you get it, and then like nobody's there, or they give you a crappy booth, or they give you a crappy speaking time. I've been to places and they give me, even though we were like one of the main sponsors of like 1 or 2 events, they give me like the worst speaking time, and it's like, well, how the hell I'm not doing this again. So it's like, I feel like we really do need to develop a third path. And I feel like other projects have done this to some extent, but I feel like, no one has nailed it, right?
Yeah, I think one of the beautiful things with crypto is if you have a big price increase, that in itself is marketing. And I think that's always when people come in our chats and Telegram and it's like, oh, the price went up. What happened? What did you guys do? And it's like, oh, we didn't do anything. It just went up out of nowhere. And one thing as far as marketing is I am in contact with the Reddit admins of the cryptocurrency subreddit, and we can do a Ask Me Anything or any kind of marketing there whenever we want. You do have to pay a fee, but it's all kind of set up and ready. So I'm hoping with the release of Bison Wallet, maybe we can run something and do some sort of giveaway there. So there are, some options there that appeal directly to a real cryptocurrency community.
Yeah, and I mean, something else that I learned recently is there's someone I know here in Tampa, and they told me, oh, I put up a billboard to advertise my business, and then I was like, oh, that's hilarious, and it's like it's a picture of me and my family or whatever, and then I was like, so did it get you some business? No, nobody ever comes in to because they saw the billboard. So it's like, it's the same problem in so many different spaces when it comes to marketing.
Yeah. Thanks for the feedback on that. I was intrigued to that because obviously since Lindsay's gone, we haven't had any publications like write about us. So I just wondered what your views were that. So it's nice to hear that. But the only other avenue that I've considered a few times and it's not been very popular, but I'll say it anyway. And that is, like Jake said, the billboard, and obviously sponsoring things like football teams and American football teams or whatever. And it really is a tough call, and sponsorship's no different than probably the getting a booth at one of the exhibitions where it's ridiculously expensive and very little exposure. So it'll be nice to see if we can maybe get a King Midas. I like that idea.
Well, I mean, so I mean, just to give you an example, I mean, a project that I would describe as having a King Midas is Tezos. So Tezos has, I think, was it Draper invested in them, and it's like if somebody like Tim, if Tim Draper invests in your, if Draper invests in your stuff, it's like, oh, suddenly you're in. There's 10 articles about you in Wired magazine, and it's like that's no coincidence. That's like that's like some insider crap. And so hey, it'd be great to get a King Midas who can actually get us coverage in places, because we really have none of that. Like what is it? We've basically been blacklisted from every major crypto publication, and it shows.
I also think about the way that PayPal and eBay started. I mean, going back a little while now, but I always remember when I joined eBay, PayPal gave me like I don't know if it was 50 quid or 5 quid, I can't remember, but they gave me money to spend on eBay to kind of to use.
The free crack giveaway.
Sorry,
the free crack giveaway.
Yeah, but I mean, the interesting thing there was it had to be used on their platform, so it kind of created this kind of this thing, I suppose, where you got the use. And I mean that, yeah, the free crack giveaway, I like that. And every drug dealer since history has used it, I suppose.
Well, I feel like the that works in certain contexts. I mean, just like okay, search ads. I know someone who works in the who works in the educational software game. They were able to use search ads and like knock it out of the park. I'm talking like $500,000 a month spend on search ads. So they were killing it with search ads. But then you go, anything that only works for very specific types of products, right? Like it has to be kind of like a derpy, like low IQ kind of like, I'm searching for this thing, educational software, and it's like boom. Anything that's even nominally nuanced or like sophisticated, it's like good luck with search ads. It's just throwing money on a fire. So it's like different tools work for different people. So it's like I feel like we have to kind of like experiment with different tools. And it's like to the free crack giveaway angle, which is that free crack giveaway works well when you have a King Midas, right? King Midas is already there saying like you should use this platform, and then they're like, whoa, when you get $40, well, that's awesome, right? So it's like, okay, well, you already had King Midas endorse it. Now there's some free money, and then it's like, okay, well, now that's bait. So it's like when King Midas announces the bait, it's hot bait. But it's like if we announce it, it's like, oh God, who would eat that?
Yes. I mean, it's great points actually. I think this is the thing. Going back to your ads. I mean, when I started my little online educational thing, and that's how I basically got all of my customers, was literally you place it ad through Google, and it was actually Facebook actually, and it built up so much revenue, but it was very, very specific. Oh, you want this, I deliver this. Whereas with crypto, you've already got a lot of scammers already doing this sort of thing and presenting yourself as a legitimate project, even though we've been around for like 8-9 years now. It's very difficult to kind of get that across. One thing I've been considering, and I might start rolling it out. I've got Joel from the Desert Links coming on, is basically doing maybe a weekly or bi-weekly onboarding session where we get these people, prominent people, to come on, and we onboard them to. I'm going to buy some relay with him because they've just announced their evolution platform, so you can do a compare and contrast. But also we could do it with the Bison wallet as well. I mean, it'd be quite getting those conversations going. It's something that I've considered, and obviously we've got a pot in the video proposal to kind of give some money to onboard this as well, which could be quite interesting. But that's one thing I'm currently considering. But in terms of getting the market out there, grassroots seems to be the way that we've approached it up to this point. And I mean, YouTube is almost a dead ground. Twitter looks fairly decent in terms of what the Decred Twitter account gets. When I post a video on Twitter now, it gets about 1,000 views. Posting it on YouTube, it gets about 300. So it's quite a massive difference there. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear some views on how we can. I mean, we're producing the content, and most of it is, especially the video content is pretty on spot at this point, I think. So it'd be interesting to see what we can do there.
Well,
So
go ahead.
we have about $2,000 in ad credits, which came with me buying the verified organization. And the reason I haven't been running ads is I'm waiting on Bison Wallet to come out, because I think that's going to be the big deal, because like I said before, it allows people to buy with USDC on Polygon, low fees, fast confirmations. Because as it stands right now, if you're an American, you can't. Buying Decred's very difficult. It's not on any of the centralized exchanges. You can kind of use these swap services that take fees, and it's not a great experience. But what's coming with Bison Wallet is I think it's going to change a lot. And you can just buy stablecoin on Coinbase, send it to Bison Wallet with no fees, because on Coinbase there's no fees with USDC, and then you can just buy what you want to buy, whether it's Decred or really any of these other coins they're adding. So once that gets launched, I'm going to start running ads and maybe doing giveaways, pushing people towards Bison Wallet. So I think it's gonna help a lot.
Sorry, Jake, what were you going to say?
Oh, I forgot, but I'm with Exitus. I think that having the ability to shuffle stable coins and then atomic swap them is going to be a big asset. That's gonna help a lot with our what is it, fiat centralized exchange issues.
Yeah. Guys, we're an hour and a half. This has been an epic conversation, and I'm feeling like we should probably do this more often, because we had so much to unpack, maybe once every 6 months rather than every year. But it's been absolutely great having you on, Jake. Exitus, as always, it's amazing just getting these insights. Is there anything else you guys want to discuss, or should we just sign off? Okay. Jake, over to you. Do the sign off for us.
Do the sign off. The revolution will not be suppressed. And I guess we'll see what happens with the in theory, eventually, I swear. But we're gonna keep doing what we're doing. It's another day, another Decred for me. And price number go up, number go down. I mean, a lot of people like NGU. One thing I like about number go down is that you get to see who sticks around, and that to me is like it's like I don't always want to give people acid tests, but that's the acid test that really stands the test of time. Who stuck around to see how it came out. So I appreciate everybody who stuck around, especially you two. And I hope there will be more of us at some point in the future.
Oh, absolutely, Jake. It's an absolute pleasure having you on. Exitus, sign us off.
Yeah, guys, just look at what Decred's built versus what everyone else has built. Look at Bison Wallet. It's going to be one of the best DEXs released. That release is coming within the next few weeks. Every 21 days, the Decred block reward decreases by 1%. It's getting more and more, harder to get. But yeah, thanks everyone for watching.
Brilliant stuff. Thanks, everyone. See ya.